This is your Classical Break, your daily dose of classical music. I'm Tyler Alderson, and today we'll be listening to 3 orchestral extracts from Hector Berlioz's sort of opera, The Damnation of Faust. Eccentric is a word that's used to describe Berlioz's personality, and it's probably a nice way of putting it. When it comes to women, stalker might be a better term. His first marriage was to an actress he saw in a play and promptly obsessed over for years. He sent countless letters to her, wrote music about her, and even moved to an apartment where he could see her coming and going on a daily basis. And that wasn't even the craziest thing he did to a potential partner. After another woman broke off their engagement, he devised a plan to disguise himself as a chambermaid, sneak into her new lover's house, and kill them both before turning the gun on himself. He even got the disguise made and set off to do the deed, later saying the only thing that stopped him was the fact that he accidentally left the dress in one of the carriages that he was taking. As you can see, he was a less than stable guy, and his opium habit probably didn't help things either. But one key aspect of his personality that led to this type of behavior was his romantic idealism. Berlioz had a love of literature, with its beautiful heroines and dashing heroes, and it can seem sometimes like he couldn't quite separate reality from the stories he had in his mind. Take his first wife, the one he stalked for years before she ever met him. He first saw her as Ophelia in Hamlet, a role that she was famous for. Seeing that play not only caused him to fall wildly in love with her, he also developed a lifelong fascination with Shakespeare. He would later say, quote, "The impression made on my heart and mind by her extraordinary talent, nay, her dramatic genius, was equaled only by the havoc wrought in me, by the poet she so nobly interpreted." And in many ways, the person he fell so wildly in love with was actually the character he saw on stage, since he didn't meet the actress portraying her for years. Berlioz's love of literature comes through in his many pieces inspired by the great works of Shakespeare, Walter Scott, and many others. And when he read Goethe's epic poem Faust, he immediately began writing music inspired by its story. There's something of Berlioz in the lonely philosopher protagonist, a man who sets out to seduce an idealized version of the perfect woman. Of course, once he actually gets her, things go south pretty quickly, not unlike what happened in Berlioz's marriage. The Damnation of Faust is also a great example of Berlioz playing fast and loose with genres and forms. Berlioz always had a penchant for doing things in an unorthodox way, from his adaptation of Romeo and Juliet into a sort of a half-symphony, half-oratorio, to his Symphonie Fantastique, one of his most famous pieces, which threw away the standard symphonic form in favor of a narrative storyline. For this piece, Berlioz wrote a musical drama that isn't quite an opera, but isn't quite anything else either. Unfortunately for Berlioz, Paris audiences much preferred straight-up operas, and the premiere was a failure. Berlioz later remarked that, quote, "Nothing in my career as an artist wounded me more deeply than this unexpected indifference," although it was far from the only time his music was met with more bewilderment than appreciation. It did end up gaining popularity as time went on, and these 3 extracts in particular from the opera have become a staple in orchestral concerts. The first one, the Hungarian March, was actually composed separately, but Berlioz decided to include it after its successful premiere. It comes as a group of soldiers marches by Faust's window, and he wonders why people are so attached to the idea of glory. The second, the Dance of the Sylphs, is where Faust is lulled to sleep by dancing spirits, and in his dreams is shown a vision of his perfect woman. The final part, the Will-o'-the-Wisps minuet, is part of the seduction of Marguerite, that perfect woman, and features a tug-of-war between a tender dance and a more fiery theme, perhaps showing that romantic love and then the more physical attraction. Here's the Philharmonia Orchestra led by Wilhelm Schuchter with 3 extracts from Berlioz's Damnation of Faust. Berlioz's music can paint such vivid pictures. If he did prefer fiction that he read to the reality that he lived, it's pretty easy to see why, if his imagination was so spectacular. Thanks to Wilhelm Schuchter and the Philharmonia Orchestra for putting that up on imslp.org. And thank you for listening. If you have the chance, please rate and review this podcast wherever it is that you're getting it. I'm Tyler Alderson, and next week for your classical break, we'll be listening to some Beethoven, some Von Hall, and we'll start things off with a Bach violin sonata. I'll see you then.